Hello and welcome to Holistic Flow. I'm your host, Julie. I'm the founder of Wild Radiance Collective, an astrologer and coach. And today I am joined by Danielle Thompson, who is a social scientist, author, and educator, founder of Una Collective, and co-author of Seismic Imprint book and Social Impact Project. Thank you so much for joining me today, Danielle.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talk about my work and our upcoming workshop for you and your audience. It's just really a pleasure.
It's going to be fabulous. I know that we
Yeah.
always have such amazing conversations when we talk. Oh my gosh, we just go off in so many different directions, pull in so much information.
Yeah.
And I love that the when we do go off in these different connections, they have these big connections or underlying themes or nuance. And I know that our conversation today is going to be filled with that as well. So I want to dive right in. Why don't you tell us about yourself and how you got into the work that you're doing?
Okay. Yeah, it's so interesting because we have had really wonderful, interesting conversations. So I appreciate talking to you so much. And one of the things that we were talking about earlier was that identity. So when you ask about the self, right? I think so many people can hopefully relate to this, but I feel like myself has been this kind of gradual evolution of sometimes what feels like looking back disparate selves right? All kind of meeting each up at this point. So I've really been lucky enough to live kind of a eventful, exciting life. I haven't always thought of that as lucky, but when you put it all together, it really does kind of feel lucky. I've had great experiences. And so, depending on what lens you're looking at my story through, or I can be a teenage mom, high school dropout with a GED, or I can be a social scientist, so like a doctor who has a doctorate, who's kind of been both a waitress at Denny's for almost a decade, and also been a teacher, an educator, an executive, and met exciting and interesting people and have navigated lots of different events in my life that really have kind of all brought me to a place now in my 50s to say, how am I going to use it? How am I going to use all this stuff that I've accumulated, all of these skills? And so it gets hard kind of at some point to maybe answer that question, interestingly
Yeah,
enough.
I think that is actually the perfect way to answer it. And I think using the reference of the lens is so important because in all things in life and in my work as an astrologer, like it is always through a lens, and everything we perceive is through a lens. Chosen, non-chosen, like
Yeah.
forced upon, or whatever the dynamic is. And honestly, I think that was the perfect intro
Mhm.
because knowing a little bit about the work and you that I do know, um, it makes me feel like I get it. I know why you created this. I can see why this work and this project and this book came through you, and why I'm already making some thoughts and connections on that. So tell us more about um what types of projects and things that you are working on, or any of your favorite positions like that you've fulfilled in roles, like what is something you would want to make sure people hear about you today?
Gosh, that's such a great question. It's such a hard question because from where I'm situated now, right? All of the experiences are so amazing. And it sounds like almost Pollyanna-ish, or like two rose-colored glasses, but I really do feel that today, or at this time in my life, that really everything has been so important when I can, especially things that happened to me young, that I had really, my narrative about them was really traumatic, and much more of a kind of survivor narrative around some of those things for a very, very long time. When it was very kind of angry about some experiences. And now I see, you hear the great sages of the world, and philosophers kind of will talk about sometimes the worst things that you went through at one time that you never thought you would ever could ever get through are now the things you wouldn't give up for anything because of the learning that took place there. And
Yeah.
so those experiences, I can see now a little bit better in hindsight, right? How one thing kind of led me to another thing, and a skill was built in one place, or sometimes I thought something that worked in another place had to be undone because I was going too far with it. I wasn't balanced enough. So, for instance, my time as a waitress, I started when I was 17 years old, and right, well, it was little before I turned 17. I had just had my oldest daughter, who has just been, both of my children, I have two girls, just profound teachers in my life, and the best things, and that have ever been lucky enough to be their moms. But working in a work setting, that was such a profound training ground. I was a young person working graveyard shift. It was really eye-opening to the world. I was seeing all kinds of parts of the world that I had never kind of known before, and navigating through it and meeting different people. And I think that was probably the start for me of where I just really could appreciate people, because people come into diners, like especially people that are by themselves, like at the counter. You really do get to know them. You have your kind of regulars, and so these stories of these people that I still think about today, and those experiences of where just people are so important to one another, and so connected, and even though they seem so different outwardly, right, but there's some basic human things. So there's a lot of there's kind of probably a reason why that was important for me to start there.
Yeah, I think that um, you really honed in on some of the pieces of the way we connect with one another. And oftentimes when we're in a situation on a podcast or, an event or someone speaking, we often expect to hear the big wow story, where it's like, there's this thing and it was incredible, or it was horrible, and then it caused profound change. But some of the things you're talking about are how these daily connections they're not trivial. They're actually big, and they go on around us all the time, and they require a lot of us. They require our love, our attention, they require our patience. They are just a part of us getting to know the world. And I think now, because I think you kind of said this, would you say that those experiences at the diner are part of what started to propel you into your interest into social science?
Absolutely. I didn't realize it then, because my bachelor's is in the natural sciences, biology and chemistry. Because I thought I would go into medical school like my brother, who was loving it, and it was really, really meant for him. But I think, yes, absolutely. I learned from that. There was, and my interest, right? It also, it taught me a lot about me and how people perceive me. Because when I was in school, it took me for like 10 years to finish, or almost, to finish my bachelor's. So, well, 8, 9 years to finish it. So because I would start and stop, I was at community college, I was working, I was doing other things for like lots of people. Right? And if people saw me, that's what, even the lens I talked about in this is interesting, kind of follow through with that. If people saw me as a teenage mom dropout, they oftentimes would treat me that way very differently than if they saw me as a student. Even if they knew I was a mom, there was something that was this more socially acceptable to them. They would give you oftentimes the tips would be different. The things and it was very interesting to me. Like as a young, why is this? Why? What would the difference be? I'm showing up the same, or I believe I'm showing up the same. But when they would ask questions, depending on the time period, it was I was in school or I wasn't in school. There was definitely a different interaction. So it kind of went both ways. That was, again, I struggled with oftentimes of having that kind of projected on me, or I did other people's view of how I'm supposed to be. As a young person, you react against that rather than trying to kind of understand it. And so it did, eventually especially when I went for my master's degree, I really unpacked a lot of that in my thesis work and the research I was doing at the time. And so it helped me as well as because I was, went through kind of a natural sciences training, kind of how to set up the scientific method and look at things. And then a lot in the social science kind of opens things up in a different way, and to the kind of idea of subjectivity and why and that I hadn't kind of reached to yet. A lot of physics and other things. Two things can be true at the same time, but at the when you're first learning, kind of they're setting up those foundational things of trying to find this objective truth, and your lived experience might be different than that. And you're trying to kind of make sense of the world, right? You're trying to make sense of your world and your place in it, and make sense of how other people see your place in the world. And if you agree with that, right? Oftentimes, if you don't agree with the box somebody's putting you in, that can be very, very difficult. Right. And so all of those things kind of led to me trying to just kind of further understand those things.
Yes. So, okay. So let me ask, and I'm going to use some of the words that you use. Basically, people were putting you in different boxes in your different roles in your times. So in your life. And I'm going to use the example of, okay, you're in school and you're having an interaction at the diner and you're having an interaction at school. Could you have both positive and negative experiences? Like, for example, could someone at the diner say, oh, you're a young mom, let me tip you extra? Or could it be, I'm shaming you and I'm not going to give you my money because I'm judging you? Like, could you have both of those?
Yes. Yeah. It had people help me, really give me a break, I'm sure, in grading, like, oh, this person's trying really hard. And then there's thinking, this was you should be doing something, you've done these things wrong. Or yes, right. I appreciate what you're doing. All of that's happening, right? And that happens to all of us, right? In all kinds of different ways. At different points in my life and in my career, it's happened like for a lot of women, right? You can have very bad experience with men, and you can have men that really are trying to kind of help and understand that things are difficult for you. It's fascinating, really, when you really are just kind of looking at all the things people are putting on you that you're trying to present, right? And how much you react to that. how much you react to other people's expectations, the programming, kind of, for lack of a better word, that you've had about yourself and how you're supposed to be or how you want to see yourself. Right. For me, in my growing up, being more being smart, or I kind of would lean into that more than kind of likability necessarily. We moved a lot. I had to be in different places, and that can be kind of a one constant thing. And so, proving yourself in one way or another, and it becomes very, I think everybody, to some extent, or what I've seen through research and my work, is that people are all struggling with that in different ways, and putting that on to people, right? Or reacting to people. And where I kind of am now with the Seismic Imprint Project and with other work that I'm doing is, you're going to find your space better when you're really okay with who you are and what you have to contribute to the world. The more you're fighting against that, or trying to prove yourself, or you are shifting based on which one of those experiences in front of you at the moment, right? If the person in front of you sees you, in my case, as a dropout, as a, going to be a drain on the world, and they're angry, and they want to kind of put that on you, and your view of yourself is going to shift because they have that, which for me, it did. I'd feel bad, or I'd react, or I'd be angry, all of the things that would come up. The more that shifts, then the other person that thinks, oh, then you're great, and you're like, oh, I need this to feed me. I need for you to see me that way, can keep you as a victim in need all the time. And you're bending with the wind. You're not stable. You don't have that. Your core is not set. There's a woman that participated in the Seismic Imprint project in this kind of first round. Annette Reed. Anybody that is on Facebook should go seek out Annette Reed. She's great. That's where she mostly does her work, and she's from Jamaica, and she has this great program that she calls Cracked Edges, because she had this vision of this plate with these cracked edges, but it never would get to the core. It would never get to the center. It's like you have to have this strong core, and a strong core will always withstand a cracked edge, right? And there's just something so beautiful and very, very true. There's a reason why most of the wisdom traditions and things kind of talk about that. It's there's a lot of truth in it, I've found over the years.
I think that the thing that caught my attention the most in your description was that, in my mind, I'm always thinking from, or in this situation, I was trying to think from the most like highest self, in my grounded nature, everything response to people, which would be either frustrated or angry at the other person. But I forgot about the very essential nature of our desire to also want to be appreciated or cared for, or, to have empathy in that way. And so I did not think about that. You're talking about this waving in the wind of going back and forth. And of course, like, we can talk about that this moment in time, that is how I received that and how I perceived it, and you were describing. And then if it was a different day, depending on how I was feeling, I could have been feeling like more drawn towards the other perspective, or this is just, I want, okay, my mind is swirling with questions. So I want to know okay, so you got your master's. When did you decide to go further? Like, what was the tipping point for you where you're like, I'm going to get my PhD?
I was still finishing up my master's, and just was kind of, I guess, not ready to leave yet. Like I was, my master's program really had a big leap in growth for me. I wasn't sure. I thought I would go to medical school. I did some work at a local hospital, some volunteer work, and a really horrible tragedy came in. There was a drive-by shooting. A person had been shot in the head, and there was kind of a policy issue there where the person would speak English. There was a person who was working there in maintenance that could understand what they were saying, but they had called because there's a lot of legalities kind of around things, and the person was very nervous to translate because they didn't want to be in trouble. I'm not sure that they would have been, but that was their belief at the time, and they finally had to basically break. This is a human being in front of them. And you could see this person. I was by the front. I could see this person like kind of struggling with, when you can tell somebody's like really trying to think of what to do. Their bodies are in that struggle. Like they're kind of up and down and moving and doing things. And so finally they're like, I know I'm not supposed to say this, but this person's shot in the head. Like because they had a thing over the wound. So of course everybody sprung into action. They took him in this trauma. Because I was a student, they asked me to go in there they said, oh, come on, you can watch this. And I'm watching them work on this person. I'm thinking I'm going to pass out, blood spurting, and every time this heartbeat. And thank God, the medical team was amazing. But my mind was to this person who was struggling to do right by another person, who felt like I witnessed this internal conflict, right? Either do right by this person, but what if I lose my job, and what about my family? Like I'm projecting all of this stuff into their mind right now, but that's how I kind of understood it at the time without them saying much, and or what I believed to be true. So there was that issue, also this issue around it was in that same hospital in a burn unit, and there was this baby that had just been burnt because they would, every time that they would cry, apparently one of the parents would burn them in their diaper, so we would see, and it did train the baby to not cry, even with all of these treatments. Like a baby would not cry, and oh God, I'm gonna I had a young child that it was. How could what? It made no sense. How could somebody be so cruel? Thinking all of that through, that made no sense to me. I'd seen harms, lots of them, unfortunately, but nothing that seems so thought out, right? To do that. Just horrifying. And my mind was never on the medical issues. Right? None the experiences with those people is what I remember, and what I cared about at the time. Never once was I interested in how to debride the wound or stabilize a person's physical body. If that made it just wasn't my call, it wasn't my interest. And so I could do it. I could perform well on exams. I could pass the science test. I could understand what was supposed to happen there. And I cared about people, so I thought it would make sense. But that's not what I cared about when I was there. It was those other kind of more social work type things or policy things that affected others that I was just more naturally gravitating towards. So I could tell I wasn't supposed to be a physician, that's somebody else's role in this world. But I just still didn't know what. And so my master's degree really expanded my thinking. It gave me all of these new tools to kind of think about the world and understand people and my place in it and others and all of that. was introduced to a lot of philosophy, and which I hadn't known. No, I'd sought out some stuff on my own, but not much. And so it really expanded me. And in the meantime, before I went to graduate school, a friend of mine said, "Why don't you try teaching? They need science teachers, and then you can kind of do that." So it kind of was a natural kind of progression because I tried it for a year before I went to graduate school. And, there was parts of that I loved teaching and interacting with the students, and I needed to learn more. And so I just kind of wasn't ready yet to leave. And so I started the PhD program in the same, or was lucky enough to be able to be admitted there to do it. Also took me quite a long time to finish that, because I had left and did kind of go back I went back to work, if you will, in a more traditional environment. But
it's a profound journey,
yeah,
to your PhD. And because I know how passionate you are about, social concepts and, how we all connect with one another or relate and learn. And I love how we can sit here today and say, well, obviously, but you had to go through that journey.
Yeah.
You had to go through those experiences. You had to find out what was most important. And one of the things I think is really amazing is that your self-awareness throughout, even starting when you were younger, and being like, well, the one thing I have that I can always have with me is my intellectual pursuits. And like you said, you pursued them, and you were driven, and you excelled, and it was great. And yet you still also had the self-awareness to be like, yeah, but this isn't it. This isn't what it's all about for me. And just allowed the journey to unfold. And now I know you're making waves today. You're continuing to make like really important projects. And I want to make sure we talk about this. So for everybody that's listening or watching, Danielle is going to be coming on for another podcast talking all about Seismic Imprint, this amazing book and project. And so we're going to dedicate an entire episode for that. But I do want to say, we've got to tell you a little bit about today, because this is how I learned about Danielle, through somebody else that I know, and Seismic Imprint. And it is just the most inspiring, empowering project. And let's have you tell them about it.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yes. It's funny that you were talking about all of this experience and making waves. I do feel like I learn best through experience, maybe because I'm also very stubborn and hard-headed and need to make all the mistakes and go just all in on just the wrong thing, get knocked down, go the other direction before I learn. So hopefully some of this will be smoother. Oftentimes trying to kind of figure that out can be helpful for other people. And so Seismic Imprint kind of came about because I was in another time of what do I do next? I had done a lot of work, innovation and education, was very excited about that for a very long time, but it was getting like, I've done this, and it was starting to maybe have more negative experiences than positive experiences, because if you are a person that is not maybe that afraid of change as others, that can be very difficult depending on environments that you're in. It's difficult on everybody, right? It's now I look at it really around how you're just not, I'm in the wrong place. Like it was, if I had decided to stubbornly pursue a medical degree, I more than likely would have gotten in. I would have done things, but it just, it's been a struggle because it just wouldn't have been my fit. And I would have been fighting against things that weren't my thing to do. Right. I would have been the physician doing something else and rather than doing the thing I wanted to do. So I found myself in that place again. The world is gone. has just been a little bit difficult. There's been a lot of divisiveness. My personal, it wasn't struggle. I was kind of feeling that again. I'm in that crossroads space and kind of looking for answers. When I was young, I was more of an activist. I'm going to change the world. I'm going to force it, Jane. I'm going to have my voice heard. And there's a role for everyone to play, and activism definitely can help the world. But it just wasn't for me right now. I could feel that, so I was looking for answers. And Rabbi Simon Jacobson, who was amazing man, also participated in the project. I was in a meeting with him looking for what do we do. Like just like that he's going to tell me this is what you do this. But he's saying you have to do what's right for you. What is your role to play? You have to find your thing to do. And so I went back to my roots, and I wanted to understand and learn. So as a social scientist, I just started picking up the phone, talking to people and interviewing them, and initially just talking to people about how are they making an impact in the world? Like, what are you doing? Because I needed ideas. And it grew because I was lucky enough to speak with one man. His name is Daryl Davis. Those of you that people on your show might have heard about him. He is a man who has for over 50 years, he's a Black man who lives in Maryland, who's been befriending members of the Klan. I thought about him because I was like, he's making such an impact. And I'd never met him, but I'd seen him on things back in the 90s. I think I'd seen him on like Oprah or something like that. And for some reason he came into my mind, and I sought him out. He was nice enough to speak to me. And I watched his documentary. There's a documentary about him, and there was activists that were saying like, well, what impact are you really making? Right. Because so yes, these are individuals, but what is that really doing? Because he's had something like 30 people leave the Klan, donate their, regalia to him. They've changed his life. Please, if anybody is interested, like he has a lot of information out there online, I think YouTube and others. But the idea of impact then was like, wow, that human connection is making such a profound and lasting impact that is measured like in generations. So how, like, that's amazing. And so I went on the hunt for a data scientist and said, let's measure this. Let's find people and measure those unbelievable interactions, because people, individuals, not celebrities, like we already know people that have a large reach make a large impact, positive or negative. You're going to do that. But I think there's so many people, like the way I was feeling of like, well, what is little me going to do? Right? Like I'm one person. There's all of this stuff. What is that going to mean? And so we went and Dr. Howe's son is amazing. And he's like, let's do it. And so we started just interviewing people that were making an impact in the world, and it snowballed. So it was people, kind of closest to us, people that we knew and we knew were making an impact. We saw them every day doing that. And they would say, well, you should talk to this person. You should talk to this person. And it was people of all ages, and people of all different, religions, cultural backgrounds, socioeconomic status, age, people in their early 20s doing just amazing things. And then people in their 70s that are just continuing to grow and doing amazing things. And so we wanted there's 50 people. They're all phenomenal, and they're all so different. And so we brought them together. We interviewed each of them, and they also filled out a survey. We did do some numerical calculations and figure out kind of the reach and what makes big impacts and what are they doing that seems to make the bigger impact and why. But it was really a very interesting road, was all the different ways to do that. And we can show you the different ways to do it. And we categorized it. We did all of that stuff. But it basically came down to what are your skills? What are you here to do? You know, and people some came from a religious perspective. And so they felt different. They used different languages. Some had no religion at all. But all of them had this sense of who they were, and they were building that. It was a constant state of growth. They were coming at it from lots of different angles, what skills that they had to provide to the world, and then they set out to do that. And it was meaningful connection and purposeful things for other people, and they were making this huge impact on the world through those ripples effects because they were just doing it. They were doing the stuff that made sense to them to do. And it was just amazing, really, like to watch that play out. So we ended up kind of veering away, although we did it, and we have it out there from the calculation, more to the, what does that look like? What are the things that they did? How could you do them? And if you did, we kind of, because we had a lot of artists in the project that were very inspirational, we created these mosaics for each person based on the things that they did and what each symbol might represent. And then put it out there for others if they wanted to see. You know, you can go on and it's free and you can kind of see who you're most like. Most of them are happy to engage with you directly. And you can work with them. Some people have actually businesses around it, but some people don't. They'll connect with you on LinkedIn. They'll talk about it. It's all to kind of help others or show this is what I do. If it helps you, then and then you can make a mosaic of your own and what your work might look like. The beautiful way that you're leaving your massive imprint right on the world is what the project is about.
It's so cool. It's so cool. And the website that Danielle's talking about is seismicimprint.com. And I will be putting that in the show notes as well. And it's a gorgeous website. If you are looking, like if you're ever in the middle of your day and you're like, I'm feeling a little sluggish, but I have big dreams, I'm living with value and purpose, go to their website and get on it and you'll just feel like, okay, yeah, this is why I'm here. This is what I'm doing. And it's kind of your own little rev up to get engaged in that space. Like the website is absolutely beautiful. It really captures so
Thanks.
many of the feelings that you talk about, that developing that center of self and continuing to build upon that. And I think that one of the beautiful things, and I'm sure you've thought of this, but for me on the outside over here, thinking of how you have gone through that own process so much in your own like life and in your work, to then bring this project into fruition and share it with the world, and then to continue to have it kind of branch out for them from there. It's becoming this big web. It's becoming this bigger sense of connection and belonging and uplift, and it's beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Like we've had so much fun with it. And the hopes is that it would help, because the stories of people really that you can relate to, you can see that it really kind of doesn't matter where you start. But at the same time, when you're in that space, you need something to start with. So for me, I needed Rabbi Jacobson to say, what do you do? That's what you start with. And so that helped me be like, that's right. I have a skill or two. I can start with something. I don't need somebody to tell me what to do. And that was a big part of it, right? We're looking for these externals. We're having, if you're in the US, the political divisions, these external leaders are going to change my world. My boss is going to change, my company is going to change my world. My partner is going to change my world, my kids, whatever it is, right? And they do affect your world. They do impact your world, and it can be in all kinds of beautiful ways. But when it's not conscious and for your own growth, then you're not moving. Right? You don't feel productive. It's not meaningful for you. And so the process, what we did see was that that's what became really meaningful. And so we categorize the people. There's the kind of warriors types that are, they'll dig in deep, they'll build their skills, they'll self-assess, and they'll move in a different way than like the people that are more unifiers, which they may look to connect first, and then that helps them understand themselves. So if they're out, it like believe it was Gandhi, right? The best way to find yourself is through the service of others. that kind of ideology where you're going to you're going to connect with other people, and in doing so helps you kind of refine you. Like me at the hospital, going there helped me to kind of refine, one, what I didn't want to do, but also what I naturally was caring about. It just being in relationship to other people will do that. Others really needed to kind of go inward first and then could go outward. Some and creators, people, and these weren't all artists, a lot were artists, but people that kind of were that way, they were like funnels. They were taking in all of this information and then just kind of making things and building things, and then learning through that creative process that way. So it was really great to see how people were starting that process. It was like we took a snapshot of where people were or now, right? And with their experience of how they got there. But especially people that were maybe in what we were calling kind of guide category. There would be either built organizations or head organizations that impact very, very large numbers of people. They went through all of them to get to that space. And then they're still growing. So it's not static at all by any means, but it's kind of where you are. Like the Guardian group, many of them were kind of started as warriors and then kind of found themselves at this point in time in this kind of guardian space. And, obviously we describe what that is, but basically the concept is just, you just got to start. It doesn't matter. Pick the person or the experience of the program that's most like where you are now, because you're going to cycle through all of them once you're paying attention. It's going to go outward, inward, to the side. But you're going to get to a place where you feel pretty strong in what you can do, what you know about yourself, and you don't move as much. Your roots are deep. Your core is strong. Your branches may sway, but your core is set. And in doing that, you're happier, you're healthier, make more money. Your community makes your money. Your company makes more money. As you have better health, there's all kinds of kind of actual tangible benefits to it.
Yeah. So the benefits and then the impact, and then it runs deep and it goes far. Yeah. It's amazing. And it's all because people decided to start, which is just the most fascinating, simplistic, yet horrifying and terrifying so often for so many of us to decide and to do it. And that is often the biggest obstacle. So if anybody gets anything from this episode, if you are thinking about working on a project, if you have a dream, if you have a vision, if you have a creation you want to bring into fruition, just start. That's it. Yeah. And maybe that's not the thing that comes to light, but maybe this other great thing that you didn't know would come if you hadn't started the other thing. Yeah. So, I love that. But we have another thing to learn about. So Danielle, tell us about Una Collective. And now this is something that you and I haven't actually talked about too much a lot. And I know that you said you've been prioritizing Seismic Imprint, and but Una Collective is now coming out more as you're dividing more of your time to it. So can you tell us about what it is?
Yes, it's basically the space. We're here in Arizona, and so the dream of creating this physical space to kind of bring all of those things together, the where people can kind of mind, body, spirit kind of grow, and know some of these other wisdom traditions and ways to do things that might have felt nervous. You wouldn't necessarily walk into a mosque if you're not Muslim, but you have an interest in kind of understanding that, or a synagogue, or you might want to understand there's people that participated in Seismic Imprint that are more kind of fitness and body based, and use lots of different modalities. One person kind of administers what Cambo, which is a kind of a frog detox cleanse from frog secretions, that I'm a personal big fan of, but acupuncture, so that concept is around this kind of wellness center where you can kind of explore, feel safe, and understand all of these different ways to kind of start. Right? Sometimes you need to start with your body, sometimes your mind, sometimes your sense of connecting to something larger than yourself and others, and to bring that whole you in a place that you feel comfortable and safe doing. So we're currently raising funds and getting ready and to draw up the plans for the physical space. But it's that idea from Seismic Imprint of like, okay, we want to make a difference in the world, and I want to be by people that also want to do that, and people that are different than me and might bring in a different perspective. But that can be really scary to do. And there are places, right? But sometimes people don't feel comfortable necessarily going because they're smaller spaces, or they're in somebody's home, which doesn't make them unsafe or inherently problematic. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that or connecting to a community. So, a cafe along with the spaces to kind of get together, and the thought to really give a place so you're not isolated and you're not alone, you're connected to others, and you're growing and developing, and there's lots of different ways to do it. It doesn't have to be expensive. I think we're coming out of that time where it's like, buy this thing for thousands of dollars that's going to change your life. And if it does, and that works for you and you connect to it, that's great. There's nothing also inherently wrong with that. It just doesn't need to be that. You can start big or small. If this thing doesn't work for you, something else will. It's what you're connecting to. But oftentimes we only kind of come across the things that are most like it. An algorithm has determined what you're going to see. And so you're going to see more of those things. So it's that space that you can expand yourself if you choose to, and grow, and see what else is out there, and from different perspectives. Because that's so cool. Like looking at yours, like as being an astrologer, that must be so fascinating. Because you're
so
seeing people, like everybody, right, could have the same sun sign. I would imagine. I'm a Pisces, but if all the other planets are different, they might not be anything alike in appearance or like how they're presenting to you. You must have a blast with kind of uncovering that puzzle and helping people do that.
It's fascinating, and I love thinking about it in the context of so many things we've talked about in this conversation. And the thing that is really beautiful about whether it's astrology or what you're bringing people together with Una Collective or with Seismic Imprint, that one of the themes that all of them have is that the path isn't linear, and you're often on this cyclical process of returning to a certain part of yourself or a certain way of being, and then kind of cycling through. And each one of them might focus on a different topic. Like you mentioned, Seismic Imprint, everybody would always kind of go out around these different archetypes and ways of being. I think that correct to say, to describe it as an archetype. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, when you're in a well-being space and you're considering holistic well-being, you are going to cycle through what you need to connect with the most, whether that's through your mind, your body, or your spirit, or, and then also, in astrology, it's kind of like every facet of life. There's lots of archetypes in astrology. There's lots of, topics to look at through. And so it encompasses all of those. And it's one thing that you might really enjoy is that it is a systematic approach.
Yeah.
And depending on how technical you want to get with it, it can be really, really extra systematic. And that's one of the things that I really love about it. And as part of my practice is I'm definitely a technical astrologer. I'm a traditional astrologer. But there's also other absolutely amazing astrologers that have completely different approaches that aren't quite as systematic, and their work still evokes that cyclical experience of self-awareness and growth and expansion and sometimes retreat, whatever it is that we need at any given time. And it's a beautiful process.
Yeah, I love it. I think I'd love to learn more about astrology in particular for all the reasons that you're talking about that, and the different approaches and talking and hearing people's different approaches. So for me, I love it. I like people and
Yes.
people are so interesting and how people are understanding and making sense of things. Science, the discoveries and how people are applying. It fascinates me. Like, I love it. And astrology, those different perspectives around how, like, a Kabbalistic astrologer might look at something different than a Western or kind of is it Vedic, looking at them, and how you're going to look at that same thing from all these different lenses. And then if it's you're going to fit that together. One of the reasons why I love Rabbi Jacobson so much, I'm not Jewish, but I grew up Catholic, and I can, though, hear a process from him. One of the most profound things for me, it was a process that I was introduced to through knowing him in the Meaningful Life Center. But it's the counting of the Omer, which is coming up. And I would never try to explain this. I will do it all wrong, and I don't want to be offensive. But it's a way, how I understand it, to refine your character. Starting after, I think it's from Passover to Pentecost, from a Christian perspective of time, I guess, Pentecost being time. And so it's so process oriented, and it was so profoundly helpful to me at the time where he was kind of talking about it and introduced it, that I probably couldn't have heard that from a priest, although I've heard wonderful things from priests. But all of my a lot of things from childhood, I think, just would get in the way of me being able to hear it and, like, really take in a process. Sometimes the difference is the beauty. That used to be that you're not connected to it initially, so you don't have any stuff associated. Somebody can tell you about it. Like, if you're using that from an astrological or something, you can give people information that they don't already have blocks up against. Yeah. And hear it. Sometimes those things can be so much more profoundly growth inspiring. And you don't have to go over to it. You have to become an astrologer, it's information from different wisdom traditions to help you make sense of the puzzle that is you, right? And how
Yeah,
you
and the
can
world,
rearrange it or look at it.
yeah, and how we can interact with the world and others, and
Yeah.
is they're all it's there's a lot of the information is great systems and tools and practices, and
Yeah.
I completely agree. And astrology, and especially anytime I'm getting into a wisdom practice and tradition, understanding the history of it has been
Oh, yeah.
paramount. And I think that definitely for understanding the world that we live in, understanding the history of how things have evolved has been so important. And so, Danielle, this is amazing, and I want to make sure that we just spend at least a couple minutes talking about your workshop that's coming up. So this coming um, up is Danielle's workshop that's going to be Unleashing Your Unique Gifts, a guided journey to impact. And this workshop sounds absolutely amazing. And as you can tell, Danielle brings a lot of passion, like knowledge, but then also very strategic and practical ways to bring what she knows and understands into being and to help others do the same. So, Danielle, can you tell us some more about your workshop that you're going to be leading?
Yes. So asked a lot, okay, where do you start? How do you know? Right. And this is where the practical learning is necessary, right? Because sometimes you're stuck and you want to make an impact, or you want to feel like you're contributing to the world, and that you feel a sense of purpose. But where do you start? So in the workshop, we'll start with kind of a brief introduction and then some assessments. You got to kind of do a reflection around you. Where are you? And so once there, you kind of know that, you can then, which tools might serve you best for right now? What are some places where you need to start? So, for instance, whatever might be kind of causing you the most distress. Something might come out in one of the assessments where you have a problem that you're trying to solve, or you perceive a problem in your life that you think is something that is preventing you. If that's physical, right? It might be the easiest thing for you to start with something physical. And so with the body and being really aware of that brings you into your mind, right? And into your heart, and then you can connect better to others. For the person sitting next to you, they may need to start with a more intellectual process. They may need to research, understand something, understand maybe a thing to solve their problem, then bring it in to the physical, right? And then that helps them connect to others. The other person on your other side might need to start with a connection, and then kind of that makes them then kind of understand it and integrate it into the body, and it all becomes a whole, right? The goal is always this kind of full self that you aren't you're able to kind of navigate those things very, very easily. But in the workshop, there'll be the assessments and the tools, because if you, we have this on the website for free. This will be more in depth there, where you don't have to go find it. We're essentially curating it for you. But again, it's that same thing. Where is your point to start? Where is your assessment of you? And then what would be your first kind of action? What is your plan? Right? So you're going to leave with a plan, something you're going to start that day or the next day. So that you're already putting it into motion. You already have some momentum behind you, because that's the hardest part with anything, is sometimes getting the momentum to start and then doing something with it, right? Because one of the things I've found in my own kind of self-help journey, like any others, you can't stay inward too long. You can lead to a very unhappy place if it gets very only introspective and you're breaking yourself down and trying to fix it, then doing that again. This part around impact is really in the world, because you're also going to get your best feedback from the world, right? In all kinds of, did something work? Did it not? How did you feel? So there's a plan and then steps to take. So the goal of the baggage is for you to kind of have that first step thing to do and plan of action. So it hopefully at least gives you kind of have that be a meaningful outlet and time for your energy for the hour and a half that you feel, yes, I've got something I can put into place now.
That's great. And it's the hardest part. I was actually just discussing job searches, and I feel like this is a perfect moment to mention this kind of same idea, is that someone I know has been deciding whether they want to apply for the job. And so they finally decided to apply for the job.
Yeah.
And now they're in that waiting period where it's like, oh my gosh, and they're kind of freaking out because it's in a different state. It means an entire life overhaul, shift of priorities, all these things. And so when I was talking to them about it, I was like, I know it's a lot and I know it's all scary, but there are really two hardest things in this entire process. And one, that's deciding to apply.
Yeah.
And two, accepting the position if you're offered it. Like, those are the two biggest things. And it's just exactly what you're talking about, to have somebody help you set the stage for the action that needs to be taken and to be walking or leaving with that from the workshop. And to be in the space to curate that, like to be with others in that same type of energy of, I want to begin something, and then have that backing you as you go, is just so important and so powerful, because we do need to have that support with one another sometimes. And especially when it is scarier or intimidating or gives you uncertainty. And I'm excited. I'm very much, I have to say, I'm very much excited for the assessments, because I think the knowledge and perspective that you're going to bring to these assessments is so much different to than some of what my clients and our community has seen before. And I really think you have such just a valuable perspective, and is just, I'm excited. I mean,
Well, I hope so. That's the plan. It's really interesting how questions are really are the key to everything. When you start to really have to answer a question, one of the things is around values, right? Tying your values into whatever it is you're doing, and you'll be shocked around the number of people that really, when asked, you think, of course I have values and I live my values. But when asked, well, what are they? That can be a really hard question. Yes. And then you have to see, do you actually live by that? If something comes up, what is it? And so when those things are not aligned with kind of how, then you have to kind of go through a process of, well, why do I think I'm supposed to do this, but really I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to justify doing this? Well, this is your value then, whatever that is, and without judgment. And so to really start to have to kind of answer the questions, but ways that hopefully can guide you. Other questions, right? If you almost decision tree, if you can't answer this, then try it like over here, then, because you can. But and it's all telling you something. It's all really good data points. There's nothing that's kind of not a data point. Your body's a data point. Other people's reactions are a data point. Your reaction to somebody else's reaction. But when you start to kind of mindfully engage with it, and on kind of purpose with a goal in mind, the picture starts to emerge in a different way. Stuff you already know about yourself on some level, right? You're just, it maybe aren't freed up to say it, or you don't feel like you are, or whatever it is. or you don't think you deserve it, or you don't want to be so bold, or whatever kind of has been taught. So in the workshop, we're just going to try to just dismantle all of that, find ways through the assessments to push all of the stuff out of the way and get to some core things for you, something that you know to be true. There's a great thing, I believe it was Hemingway, when he got stuck in something to write, to just write, he would write what he knows to be true, just one thing he knows to be true. And then the story flows. So if it wasn't Hemingway, then whichever author said it, brilliant. Because it's so true. Something is true for sure, and you know it. There's at least one thing you know that to be true, and the assessments will hopefully help you to get that if it doesn't come easy. And then we start to build a step and a plan for you.
Excellent. This workshop is going to be amazing. So this workshop, Unleashing Your Unique Gifts with Dr. Danielle Thompson, is on Wednesday, March 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. It's live on Zoom and it includes a replay. So if you're not able to attend live, no worries at all. That's how a lot of people in our community get to engage with our offerings and our special events. So we would love to have you there. This is going to be a great experience. I know that Danielle is very hands-on and likes to interact with people that she's working with, and I know she's excited too. So if you are able to attend live or make time to attend live, I definitely encourage that. And I'm going to include all of the ways for you to get in touch with Danielle in the show notes below. So if you can grab the link, but you'll definitely want to check out seismicimprint.com, and then you'll be able to find Danielle on LinkedIn as well. And thank you so much, Danielle.
It's been such a great experience. I appreciate you having me on.
You're welcome. Thank you. This has been an absolutely amazing experience for me and everybody else listening and watching as well. And I'm so excited to continue to see what you create. And I look forward to chatting with you next time when we dive even deeper into Seismic Imprint.
Great. Looking forward to it. Nice talking to you, Julie.
Nice talking to you as well.